Hi, welcome to this presentation on filling holes using Koha's Transport Cost Matrix. My name is Sally Healey and I am one of the Systems and Information Librarians working for Cheshire Shared Services. I'm going to give you some background on our setup in Cheshire and then I'm going to talk through the options in Koha for filling holes. I'm going to show you the Transport Cost Matrix, explain how it can be set up and demonstrate why you may find it useful. As a quick piece of background information, Cheshire is in northwest England. Cheshire Shared Services covers two unitary authorities in Cheshire, Cheshire East Council and Cheshire West and Chester Council. We have one instance of Koha, meaning that the two authorities share a system and a library catalogue. Our patrons can use any of our 40 libraries across both of the authorities. They can borrow stock from one authority and return stock to the other. We don't float our stock. Our items are then returned to their correct home library and they are transported by two vans. The vans are based in one location at Cheshire Shared Services and there is a van allocated to each authority. When it comes to holds, we try to fill holds within each authority, so we would like to use Cheshire East stock to fill Cheshire East holds and Cheshire West and Chester stock to fill Cheshire West and Chester holds. One of the reasons for this is because moving items across the authority boundary increases the transit time. As you can see on the diagram, an item swapping from west to east or east to west has to come into shared services first, which adds time and staff handling to the process. Like most library services, we aim to fill our hold requests as quickly as possible. We average around 70% of holds filled within the first 7 days. This rises to 80% filled within the first 14 days and 90% filled within the first month. Which brings us to the question, how do you fill holds in the fairest, cheapest, and most importantly, the fastest manner? Koha has two options for finding holds, holds to pull and holds queue. Holds to pull presents you with all holds on the system which need to be filled. Holds to pull is fantastic if you have one library. As soon as you have multiple libraries, the report becomes a little unmanageable. So in the example I've set up today, we can see that there are 259 holds on the holds to pull report. The staff can narrow the results to just the library they're in by using the drop-down menu at the foot of the report and selecting their library. Having done this, the results now show 42 holds. And this seems like a fair report, but there's a major issue. As you can see from this example, there is one hold on the world's worst children, but there are 18 copies available across our libraries. And we tend to find that our staff will perform similar tasks at similar times. And this makes sense. You wouldn't want staff checking for holds when you first open, or last thing at night after the van skips have already been packed for collection the next day, or during a busy lunch hour. So this means that 18 members of staff in 18 different libraries are probably going to look for the same item at around the same time. There can only be one winner, which means that 17 staff are going to be disheartened. And let's say for the 42 items on our list, our staff member finds 35. By the time they return to the desk half an hour later and check them in, perhaps 30 of them have already been filled by other libraries. Not only is this disappointing for the staff member, but this is a waste of time. The staff member has retrieved the items, checked them in, and then has to reshelve them again. Holds to pull is not really suitable for a multi-library setup. You could, if you have a small number of libraries, arrange times or days for different libraries to check the holds to pull list so that you don't have these collisions. But for us with 40 libraries, it really wasn't suitable. Which brings us on to the holds queue. Unlike holds to pull, holds queue does not display every hold which could be filled by a library. Instead, it generates a bespoke list of items to be found, and using your criteria, Koha determines the best library to fill each hold. You can see on our system here that Crew Library had 26 holds that they could have potentially filled, but our holds queue only requested 7. It determined that those 19 other holds could be filled faster from other libraries. If holds queue is set up correctly, there's no duplication, so you don't risk multiple staff members searching for items to fill the same hold. So how do you set up the holds queue? Well, there are 3 preferences, and these are all found in Administration, Global System Preferences, Circulation, Holds Policy. The 3 preferences are grouped together, and they are Static Holds Queue Wait, Holds Queue Skip Closed, and randomize holds queue weight. With static holds queue weight, you are ranking your libraries in the order that you wish them to fill the holds. Koha will request as many items as possible from the first branch, and then the second, and then the third, and so on. It cascades down in the order that you have entered. One thing that should be noted is that unlike holds to pull, the staff cannot ignore an item on the holds queue and hope that another library finds it, because no other library is asked to look for that item. If an item is on your holds queue, Koha has determined that you are the best possible library to fill the hold. So if the staff search for the item and cannot find it, they must change the item's status from available to a missing status, and then Koha will ask the next library in the list. The next preference is holds queue skip closed. This is a really useful preference, and when we first started with Koha back in 2015, this preference didn't exist. The reason why it's important is, let's say that Franklin Library and Liberty Library are both the same size, but Franklin is open on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, whilst Liberty is open on Thursday, Friday and Saturday. If the preference is set to open or closed, and an item could be filled by either Franklin or Liberty, the request will sit at Franklin because it is first on the list, even on Thursday, Friday and Saturday when there are no staff in the building to check and fill the holds. Changing this setting to open means that on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, Franklin will be asked for the item because they're first on the list, but Thursday, Friday and Saturday, the request will move on to Liberty. The final preference is randomize holds queue weight. Now, we've not used this preference since 2015, so I am happy to be corrected if this has changed. But we found that this preference was true to its name. It really was truly random. So if a staff member loaded the holds queue, it might give them 60 holds to look for. If they pressed refresh, it would then come back with 5. Press refresh again, it came back with 24. Press refresh again, it comes back with 196. And this brings us back to the problem of the holds to pull list. If the holds are being randomly allocated each time the queue is loaded in a library, it risks staff looking for the same items, so we soon stopped that experiment. We used this setup reasonably successfully for a while, but it has three major drawbacks. The first is the order of the libraries. If we have 400 holds on the system and Koha is asking the first library, so in this example it's Centerville, to fill as many holds as possible, Centerville could be asked for 250 items, whilst Fairview, the next on the list, is asked for 100, and Union, all the way at the bottom, is only asked for 3. Oh, it's not really fair to the staff, and it risks overloading the van capacity over at Centerville. Patrons wait longer for holds because, with the best will in the world, 250 items is a lot of items to search for and process, all whilst Union is underutilised. We also have to decide which library to place at the top of the list. And for us with a dual authority setup, how do you decide whether an East library or a West library should take the majority of the requests? We talked earlier about not wanting to move stock across the authority boundary, but with this setup, there's no way round it. We mitigated it for a period of time just by editing the list each week, but that's not ideal. And finally, and possibly worst of all, you are instructing Koha to always check in the order on the screen: Centerville, Fairview, Franklin, etc. But let's say there's a patron who belongs to Union Library. They place a hold on an item which belongs to Union Library. It's on the shelves at Union Library, and the patron wants to pick up from Union Library. But we've told Koha to ask Centerville to fill the hold, and then Fairview, and then Franklin, and Union is last on the list. This is really frustrating because we can all see that it's cheapest and quickest to fill the hold from Union. It's simply a case of moving it from one shelf to another with no transit time needed. But the good news is we can solve all of these problems with the transport cost matrix. So the first thing we need to do is enable it. We go to Administration, Global System Preferences, Circulation, Checkout Policy, and here we choose Use Transport Cost Matrix and set this to Use. If you go back to Administration, you can load the Transport Cost Matrix. You are presented with a grid, and just like static holds queue weight, you are going to rank your libraries. We do this by setting an artificial cost for the transfer of items between libraries. This cost doesn't really exist, there's no charges generated, there's no money to be waived. The other thing is you can see from this initial screen that there are blank cells for transfers between Centreville to Centreville and Fairview to Fairview and, well, all of the libraries. So this solves our previous example with the patron at Union who placed a hold on an item on the shelves at Union and wants to pick up the item from Union. The transport cost matrix already knows that this is the cheapest option. And we can solve our other problems here too. We can spread the load across our libraries so that Centreville is no longer filling 250 holds out of 400. We can also prioritise groups of libraries. So for us in Cheshire, that might mean prioritising east to east and west to west, and applying a penalty for east to west and west to east. So how do you set this up? Well, the best part of this is that you have full control. You don't need any assistance from anybody else to make any changes. You can turn the transport cost matrix on and off yourself, and you can change all of the values. So if it all goes horribly wrong, which it won't, you can delete it all and start again. You need to consider your variables in your library service. You might wish to prioritise transfers from libraries with the most collections and deliveries, because those items will move more quickly. You might wish to prioritise transfers from medium-sized libraries, because you think the staff have more time to check the shelves or fewer shelves to check. You might wish to group your libraries into regions, so libraries geographically close to each other move items between themselves before going further afield. All of these factors are specific to your own setup. And before lockdown, for us, we grouped by authority and then by number of van deliveries. You can make this as simple or as complicated as you wish. You could start out with a simple setup, which should give you some good results, and then you can make adjustments as you become used to how it operates. Now, for example, this is our post-lockdown setup. We have some libraries which are not receiving deliveries and others which are operating fully, and as you can see, it's quite complicated, so this is why I'm using a sandbox to demonstrate, because it's easier to understand the theory on a smaller scale. So, just like with static holds queue weight, you are ranking your libraries. You can choose any scale that you like. You can choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could choose 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Or you could choose 0.01, 0.02. It doesn't matter. The lowest value is the library that Koha will choose to fill the hold from first. So to start us off, I have replicated here the static holds queue weight. Now note how Centreville is always the lowest value library, whilst Union is always the highest value library. But of course, we don't want to replicate static holds queue weight. So here's an example of libraries evenly spread. Now note how each library is the first choice for one other library and also the last choice for one other library. So you could use a system like this, which does spread the work across all of your libraries, but this doesn't take into account whether your libraries are larger or smaller or better equipped to fill holds. Now, the only rule you have to follow is that the cells in an individual column should contain unique values. The reason for this is because the cron job runs and Koha calculates which items to put onto each library's holds queue. We can see in this example that Midway and Union both have a value of 1 when transferring items to Centreville. As there's no difference between those values, Koha selects 1 at random. The next time the job runs, Koha chooses 1 at random again because the two values are the same. So depending on how frequently your cron job runs, this could lead to two libraries looking for the same item. So you must make sure that all of the cells in each column has a unique value. However, values in rows can be the same. So it could be that Centreville is the best library to fill from. So it doesn't matter that these all have the same value, it just means that that library will be called upon more. Okay, so here's an example of two groups of libraries. We've put Centreville, Fairview and Franklin in group 1, all swapping items between each other, whilst Liberty, Midway and Union are in group 2, all swapping items between each other. Note the higher values when group 1 swaps with group 2. That's fairly easy to see because you've got a few libraries, but you could use a wider range of values to make it easier to see who's grouped together. I would suggest creating a spreadsheet using the software available to you, and this can be loaded onto Koha once you're satisfied. And when you're used to filling in the transport cost matrix, you can start creating more complex setups. I've recently created one which splits the libraries into two groups, a blue group and then a green group, and then from there into four groups. So now I've got a blue group, an orange group, a green group, and a purple group. So I've set a cost range for each of those groups. So blue libraries transferring to blue libraries cost 0 to 15, blue to orange costs 25 to 40, blue to green costs 50 to 65, and blue to purple costs 75 to 90. This is what it looks like for all of those groups together. And from there, I've subdivided each colour group into two groups, a 0 to 5 group and a 10 to 15 group. You can see what this looks like on the transport cost matrix. We've got 0 to 5s, and then we've got 10 to 15. I've done that all the way along for the blue group, and then I've done that for every colour. Now, you really don't have to create something this complicated, but the point is the transport cost matrix is really flexible and really powerful. So it doesn't matter if you're a 4 library setup or a 40 library setup, it will help you to get the results that you need.